Howdy folks, and welcome to another episode of Star Wars Lore, and today's episode is on Kuat Drive Yards. Now, if you were on the planet Kuat and looked up at the sky, you wouldn't be able to help but notice that it was dominated by the massive orbiting starship construction yards. Now, these were the planet's sole source of income, but they made the planet Kuat one of the richest in the galaxy, producing huge numbers of spacecraft from the days of the Old Republic right through to the rise of Palpatine's New Order and the subsequent emergence of the Rebel Alliance. Kuat Drive Yards, or KDY as they were commonly known, built and sold ships of all shapes and sizes to anyone who could afford them. Now, as the Old Republic crumbled, Kuat Drive Yards and their short-lived subsidiary Kuat Systems Engineering built the Firespray class patrol and attack ship and the HAVW A5 Juggernaut assault vehicle. The Firespray, if you're not familiar with that model, was actually pretty much Boba Fett and Jango Fett's ship. Boba Fett's and Jango's ship, Slave 1, was a highly modified Firespray. Now, during the Empire's heyday, KDY took over Rendili's Star Drive to fully absorb all production of Star Destroyers, such as the Imperial 1 and Imperial 2 class, and the Super class models. They also built the Nebulon B frigate, frequently used by the Rebellion. Now, extending many kilometers into space around the pleasant blue-green world of Kuat, the massive, all-encompassing Kuat Drive Yards were home to billions of workers, their families, and related support industries. Now, many of these people never set foot on the surface of Kuat itself, much less left the system. And it was this way for many hundreds of years, with its success bringing no desire to change. Tugs and barges delivered massive stocks of raw materials drawn from across the galaxy, dropping packages of ore into the gaping maws of largely automated factories. These installations worked constantly to produce the durasteel and other materials needed by the starship construction yards, to which they were linked by transport tubes, turbolifts, and even walkways. Now, the factories, space docks, living quarters, workshops, administrative centers, repair bays, leisure domes, and so on were all connected. They were never isolated. However, this immeasurably vast complex was restricted to employees of KDY. Now, 3 huge space stations orbiting the planet were the only spaces that non-KDY staff could access easily. Now, these stations dealt with passengers, commercial freight, and eventually Imperial personnel. Now, to an engineer, the Kuat Drive Yards were the closest thing to paradise they were ever likely to encounter. The staff of the Kuat Drive Yards had an almost religious devotion to the company, as well as to the head of the company. Now, despite this, formalities were frowned upon in the KDY complex. The head of the company was simply referred to as technician, and dressed in the same green coveralls common to all staff. Now, maybe a little due to the fact that Kuat chose to remain neutral in all conflicts, contributed a lot to Kuat Drive Yards' longevity. As simply put, those who ran Kuat were only interested in the client's credit account, not their allegiances. Now, Kuat itself was ruled by several dominant extended families. Many similar societies had been compromised by destructive internal squabbles that prevented them from achieving anything of galactic note. But the ruling families of Kuat created a system to prevent this. Firstly, hereditary inheritance was forbidden. The direct genetic heir of the house patriarch could not rise to the rank automatically. Instead, when the patriarch sought an heir, they had to buy a Telban to provide that heir. Now, a Telban was a middle-class human from the Kuat system, whose job was to parent a child with a Kuati noble. There were male and female Telban, but the males were more commonly chosen because Kuat was a matriarchy. Selected ideally on the grounds of intellect and ability, though usually on appearance, unfortunately for the genetic stock of some families. And regarded as a piece of property, the Telban nevertheless remained in the family as a source of guidance and tutelage for their offspring. The Telban's former family was extremely well compensated for their loss. Now, the only exception to this rule was that of House Kuat. This was the house selected to directly manage the Kuat Drive Yards. They alone could pass the control of the KDY directly onto their genetic heir. Upon assuming their duties as technician, the heir was known as Kuat of Kuat. and this law was known, in typically direct Kuat terms, as the inheritance exemption. At the time of its introduction, and right up until the end of the practice, the exemption was hotly contested by House Nylon. So while the shipyards themselves were a model of unity and efficiency, the planet of Kuat was locked in political struggles as each house sought to dominate the others and to challenge House Kuat for rulership of the Kuat Drive Yards. Now, House Kuat actually did an exceptional job of growing and developing the Kuat Drive Yards. Over many generations, they became so in tune with the men and machinery of the yards, not to mention the ships produced, that it was said that the Kuat of Kuat could sense an approaching vessel of KDY construction, or know when a ship was complete and ready to be born. And the other ruling families on Kuat itself, and indeed the entire planet, did extremely well from the immensely profitable business, becoming some of the richest people in the galaxy. But this did not prevent the other families from attempting to overthrow House Kuat, foolishly seeking to run the yards themselves. In the end, however, it was the prevailing political upheavals in the galaxy at large that brought down House Kuat and nearly destroyed the shipyards themselves. Emperor Palpatine greedily desired to possess the Kuat yards, as did Prince Shizor of Black Sun. Now, the Rebel Alliance courted KDY's favour, but its inventory of ships was beyond their small means. The then Kuat of Kuat did all he could to guarantee the continued independence of his business, and became as well versed in political game playing as Palpatine and Shizor. Now, beset on all sides, particularly by conspiracies from the Kuat families of House Nylon and House Kulvolt, Kuat of Kuat finally overstretched himself when dealing with the bounty hunter Boba Fett. In making a pawn of Fett, Kuat of Kuat made a deadly enemy. His schemes unraveled and his paranoia grew until he attempted to destroy the yards himself in a massive sequential explosion. Now, his plan was foiled by Fett, however, and the power of House Kuat was over. Both political and social fallout followed, but this had little discernible effect on the yards themselves. Business continued, and powerful organizations and individuals continued in their attempts to have the facilities allied to them. But as generations of Kuat promised, the Kuat Drive Yards are eternal. And that is the planet Kuat and the Kuat Drive Yards. So if you like the video, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to keep updated from the latest videos, leave a comment or two, let me know what you thought of the video, and I will talk to you all in the next one. Later.